Let me just start the record.
Okay. Call the government ops meeting to order. I'm going to need a motion to accept the February 25th minutes.
Motion from Dave. Brian.
Okay, we got a motion. Do we second?
Second by John.
John Rozell. Okay, all in favor say aye.
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 Carried. Okay, first up is Board of Elections. They have a conference call this morning, so they want to start first.
Or meeting ID followed by pound.
Leslie and Jeff are here from Board of Elections.
Go ahead.
We need approval to do a grant. The grant is a federal and state together,
Please enter the meeting
and it pays for, or it'll pay for all the extra we've incurred because of coronavirus, putting on elections this year.
You have been put on hold by the host. You cannot listen or talk until the host releases the hold. You are muted. Pressing star 6.
We're having a few technical difficulties.
Okay, through all that technical difficulties, did you get what I asked?
Yes.
I'll move the resolution.
Dan Shaw says he'll move it. Is there a second? Dave O'Brien?
Wait a minute.
Dan's
Dan's
Oh, Dan, I'm glad you moved that. So Dave's gonna move it. Is there a second?
I'm not on government ops.
I'll second it.
John Rozell.
I didn't know that.
Okay, any discussion on the grant? I have Elmo left.
Chairman, did she give the dollar amount so we can do a budget amendment and finance for it?
It was so jumbled
It's
I didn't hear it.
70,000. Yes, 70,000.
Anything else we need, Al?
Works for me.
Okay. Any more discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
We're carried. Okay, was there
Thank
anything else?
you.
Thank
Oh,
you.
that's it.
Very good. Okay. Buildings and grounds, we're going to Matt Jones.
Mr. Chairman, just, I know Board of Elections had to jump off and go to another conference call, but, just so we're aware, I told you last time that the June 23rd primary canceled. There was an appeal to that. Currently, the June 23rd primary is back on. So unfortunately, we're gonna have to do, absentee ballot applications, and operate all the poll sites. So there's a lot of logistics and hurdles that we have to overcome. The lawsuit challenging the cancellation of the primary has now been appealed again. So because of the short time frame, we're going to continue as though there is an election coming up, and we'll see what the outcome of this latest appeal is. But as of now, we have to proceed as though we are going to conduct the Democratic presidential primary.
Any idea when that's going to be heard?
That would be a Roger question more than I.
It'll go to the Second Circuit. I would assume they'll expedite it, but there's all.
Okay. Very good. Matt Jones, we're ready for buildings and grounds. And I can't hear you.
He's unmuted.
I still can't. It looks like it. Matt, you might have to come join us.
Is anybody else getting an echo through there?
Matt
Yes,
Hicks?
the echo is absolutely terrible.
Wow, where's this coming from?
Matt, go ahead.
Brian, can I ask everybody to mute themselves unless they're going to say something? Because somebody's getting awful feedback. We can't hear anything.
Yeah, no, I'm hearing the same thing you're hearing.
I think I just got it. Somebody dialed in and had their video on live. So, I think we're good.
Oh, okay.
Better now.
Much.
Anybody gonna make a joke about being in an echo chamber?
He does?
There's Matt Jones. Maybe.
All right.
We had him for a minute, didn't we?
Yeah, I can hear him.
You're gonna get a live tour, we're gonna walk down the hallway behind him. There you go. On your left.
Way to go, Jonesy.
I shouldn't take long, Brian, if you want me to do my stuff.
Yeah, go ahead, Laura.
Okay, just wanted to give you a quick update on real property. We got the majority of the tenant rolls out, which I had mentioned before. Everything's been posted on the IMO. Some of the towns, everybody's doing things a little different for grievance day. Check with your town assessor, see what's going on. All the information's been posted on the image made online. I did have some staff come in to help with the printing and things like that, but we are now starting the village tax bills. I do have some staff that are in helping with the printing and we'll be helping with the folding and sealing when we get that started later today. I want to give kudos to the IT staff in the middle of all this, of the assessors having to complete their tentative assessment roles. The IT staff switched us from what was called a Barracuda environment to this Pulse environment. The Pulse environment is a great environment. I work from home. All the assessors are loving it, and the IT staff was able to hook them all up to the new Pulse connection. It seems to work really well. And I've had a lot of compliments to our IT staff for the ability to help our assessors through and sometimes that doesn't always go as smoothly as wished, but everything seemed to work okay with that changeover. And they all seem to be really happy with the environment. My staff is jumping off and picking up paperwork to get the transfers out to your local assessors in a timely manner. And other than that, the reval is started. I have a teleconference tomorrow with Supervisor Ferguson and his assessor, June Manichak, and we're going to start going over some of the process of the data collection that will be done up in the town of Dresden. So we look forward to starting that process also. That's all I really know. Matt's here, so unless somebody has any questions.
Dana.
Laura, grievance day is coming up in a couple weeks. Grievance day is normally not a public type of hearing. So if a town has their grievance day by a Zoom or some other method like that, they should beware that they do not make it open to the public. Is that correct?
Grievance day is an open, the meeting itself is an open meeting, Dana. It's when they go in to do their determinations of what they're going to do as far as lower any assessments, but the actual grievance day, the normal hours that they normally are hearing grievances is an open meeting.
Okay, thank you.
When they go to do their determinations, that is a closed meeting, and the assessor usually is not even involved in that meeting, or should not.
Thank you.
You might be thinking of the informal meetings that folks have with assessors before Mr. Half, those are not public.
No, I'm referring to grievance day.
Yeah, that's a meeting of your Board of Assessment Review or whatever, so it would be a public meeting.
Thank you.
Laura's right.
Very good. Okay, Matt has joined us now, so we're ready to go to buildings and grounds.
Do I have to unmute something?
Nope.
I'm good to go. All right, so we're gonna start out with updates, and I guess the big question is how many crew staff I'm bringing back and how we're getting back to taking care. First, I realize our department is a service department, so it directly relates to how many buildings are open and how many people are coming back. So I'm kind of gearing basically, as more people come back, I need to bring more people back. If that brings half her guys back or whatever she might be doing, whatever her plan is. But as the building's open, there's always gonna be maintenance calls. So it's kind of judging. Right now, we have, 2 guys doing maintenance every day. They're doing regular routine maintenance on our equipment that has to be done every spring, fall to have our air conditioning or heating or whatever might be, needed, plus the service calls of the department and the people are working, which is still kind of gearing up. We're getting more calls every day. So then my night, staff, which is our cleaning crew, we started with 1 guy every night, and then we've ramped to 2. We're up to like 4 guys. We're cleaning the sheriff's substation. We're cleaning the law enforcement center. We're cleaning public health every night, and the courts. On Friday nights, we're doing a full cleaning of the whole complex because there is departments that are coming in a little bit at a time, and we don't know. It's hard to keep track of who's bringing 2 guys in today or whatever, or who's bringing in a full staff. So basically, 1 day a week, we're doing full cleaning to keep up, which is, what you normally see 5 days a week. So that's my buildings and grounds staff, I guess.
Can you tell us what percentage you're at right now?
I would say we're probably total hours, 30%.
30% total hours?
Up to total hours, sorry, because we're 100% staff at one, for one thing, and then,
For another.
10 for another, but then tomorrow, the workload might be, I need 70% again. So we're really going according to, how people are using. I know, it seems like Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, for whatever reason, tend to be more problematic than others. We have more calls, and I don't know if that's because certain staffs are staffing up more on certain days, but, or it's just chance of it.
So you're looking for direction on how you ramp up your staffing as other things join in?
I don't think I'm looking for any direction. I just have to weigh and judge as people come.
Okay, so it's just a broad update that.
Yeah, just a broad update. If there is any questions, and you can shoot them at me. I mean, I'm trying to do the most with the least right now. And if there's any department that needs something, I guess they don't normally hesitate anyways, but we do have guys here, so.
Do we have any questions from anyone on the board here? Sue Clary? You'll have to unmute, so.
There we go. Matt, how do you deal with the public health portion? Because they're there 7 days a week. And I'm sure when they go in on Monday, they want to make sure that things are cleaned out after the weekend. How does that work for you?
So right now, we are doing a thorough cleaning every night. They're also cleaning, and this goes for every department, but they're also cleaning their personal areas. They have the tools and stuff to clean their personal areas. We're just really supporting them. Whatever they ask for, we're doing. If they're asking us to clean something extra or do anything more, we do. I can just tell you one example. There was somebody tested that had worked in the food pantry out there. It ended up being a negative test, but we immediately responded with 4 guys, and we sanitized the whole food pantry and did everything we needed to. And basically, my goal is not to shut things down as people get tested.
Yeah.
If somebody in this room, doesn't feel good today, we can come and clean this out. We don't need to stop and empty the building for a week because somebody tested. The idea is to come in and clean and do it so we could carry out another meeting tomorrow in the same place and not be affected. Because if we react to every test that's done, we'll never use any space. I think in the future, this is kind of setting the precedent for now, for the next year, of how we respond to somebody that possibly have been contaminated in an area.
So Matt, I guess my question is, it's more than 5 days a week. You're sometimes doing 7 days a week?
The nurses haven't requested us to do 7, so their weekend stuff, they haven't felt it's come to the need yet of us coming in specifically. I can tell you there's been occasions where we come in, but it's not a normal scheduled thing.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Matt? John Rozell?
When you have these guys come in, special call, are they on the time and a half schedule also?
Yes, they're the same as every other county employee.
Anything else, Matt? Are we good?
That's just it for my buildings and grounds, guys. One thing we're gonna bring up is parks. We need to start coming to a consensus of how we want to approach the parks this year. It's that time of year we've taken over the winter, which is normal. We've taken a lot of reservations and stuff. I guess I'm looking for guidance. Is it time to refund all the reservations? How we open the park? If we open the park, do we not hire our staff? You know, we've already been in discussions, as you know, all winter to get a park staff. So now's the time we need to tell them that we aren't going to need them, or we are going to need them. I guess I'm going to leave it out there and let people start weighing in, and I'll just listen and I'll answer any questions.
Did you want to go there, Chris?
Yeah, so, one possibility to consider, for the board and perhaps my recommendation, and I want to be clear that this is, my initial recommendation, and I think that the esteemed Esquire will have some comments to make, but my initial recommendation would be that we, essentially open the gates of the parks. We put up signs that say recreate at your own risk. We place snow fence around the beaches, and that we do not staff the parks at all this summer. If we hired no park staff and we took in no revenue from the parks, it would be roughly a $90,000 net savings to the general fund. My concerns are the liability of trying to enforce social distancing if we allow the parks to operate in the traditional fashion that we operate in. That being said, I think it's important that we continue to provide the recreational venues to the citizens. It is their parks. And so I'm putting out there a compromise where we allow people to utilize the parks, but we do not provide the services that we normally do. My preference would be that we don't open the restrooms or the tennis courts, or anything like that, but simply provide the venues for people to use without really any amenities.
John Rozell?
What liability would we fall into if we open, say, Hewlett's and somebody drowned on the beach?
And I think that is exactly Mr. Wicks's concern.
Well, if we rope off the beach, and I guess I would say snow fence off the beach, for lack of a better term, and I would also recommend, if you're gonna do that, probably the pavilions as well,
Yeah.
because those will be large gathering places. And say, do not use the beach, and somebody crosses the fence, that's a whole different situation than if we have an open beach with no lifeguard. So there will be increased risk in whatever you do. It's just what are you comfortable with assuming? But putting the fence and signage up tells people they're not supposed to be there. Are people going to go over those fences? Yes, but they're going to go over them knowing they're not supposed to be there. Especially in the case of Hewlett's, I would assume that we will get frequent calls from the neighbors at Hewlett's who can see that beach to tell us that somebody's on it. And I would recommend we ask the sheriff to increase patrol with both parks.
Yep.
But when we put up no signs, we have to keep it reasonably safe. The only duty you owe to a trespasser is any open and notorious problem. So you can't dig tiger traps, for example, and Chris is upset about that, but you can't dig a tiger trap and then have a trespasser fall in it and say, oh, geez, he shouldn't have been there in the first place. But if you make it reasonably safe, and we're down there checking on them every once in a while to make sure, like a tree's not down or something like that, I think we'll be okay. The swing set equipment might be problematic too, depending on what phase of the opening we're in, because right now I think playground sections are also closed, so we'll have to keep an eye on that as well. So when you get down to it, Hewlett's, really know how much, Ulysses isn't very big to begin with, and I don't know how much of it would be left to really use. But, Lauderdale has plenty of trails, and we get people off the road, which right now I think is a safety factor, down into the parking, and, there's certainly no reason you can't walk the trails, but again, we'd have to check them. So if we had a manager who went back and forth between the two and looked at them, you know, yes, there'll be increased risk because there won't be people looking at what's going on. So it's a question of how much appetite the board has for that.
Matt, Jones, you had something to add?
Yep, just gonna throw in just a couple comments on that. We do have staff that goes there normally twice a week anyways, my buildings and ground staff. If we did not have a park staff, they would be charged with mowing the lawns and doing the upkeep, that's a normal.
There'd be garbage too, right?
Well, we don't put garbages out, so we've never had a garbage service there.
Okay.
Yeah,
They just put up a carry in, carry out sign. You know,
Okay.
obviously,
closed,
very
carry in,
good.
carry out.
obviously they'd have to probably pick up some, I mean, people
Well,
aren't
no,
perfect,
yeah.
but as far as the trails, you know, some of the other recreations that happen at Hewlett's, but right now the gate's open at Hewlett's, and it always is, the gate is open until the parks.
It's open when we're closed and closed
Yes.
when we're open if there's any.
So, the big recreation at Hewlett's is people launching their kayaks and their boats. And if we beach, you know, if we snow fence off the beach, they would still be able to launch, park, and go out in their kayaks, canoes, and this and that. And I think that's probably a good solution to, you know, because I would say a lot of our calls come from people wanting to launch a car top boat at both parks. And we never regulated that as lifeguards anyways. People came and they did it, and our lifeguards never, you know, that wasn't part of their job. So, I can live with that. I don't know if at this point I would even say hire a lifeguard if we're not gonna, or a manager if we're not gonna open. I would probably just have my guys do their normal
Make
maintenance.
sure everything's up to par.
Yep, because they're gonna go there once a week to mow the lawn, they're gonna check in, they're gonna respond to calls anyways, which was a normal occurrence, you know, things happen, neighbors, our phones will still be open about the parks. It'll be basically, cutting Casey loose on probably all the, refunds, you know, for the stuff. And if this is what we decide to do today, I guess we start working today and we start calling everybody that's involved with the parks and letting them know.
Okay, day and a half.
Chris, you said that this would amount to a $90,000 savings. Is that 90,000 even if you take into account that there is no revenue? So even if we were to take in, even if it was a normal year and we took in revenue at the park, it still cost us net effect $90,000.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, Matt Hicks.
Matt sort of answered it, but the question was, if we're gonna rope off the pavilion and rope off the beach, what's the point in opening? Is it just so kayaks and rooftop boats can get in? Is that the only thing we're gonna be really allowing?
I can tell you that the parking lot at, Lauderdale is full out into the road with people hiking right now. I mean, it's always been, you know, full in the spring before our gates open, but right now, I was there firsthand for a meeting the other morning with the state rep from the parks, and there's people parking out on 22 trying to get in. So one of my recommendations would be to open that gate before we have a problem, because people are still actively hiking and walking and enjoying the park. I mean, it seems to be a renewed energy in being outside, and I'm sure you guys hear that.
Okay, thanks.
Jay Scully.
Yeah, I'd agree with Matt. There's people that use Lauderdale year round. And when it gets warm in the summer, there's going to be people there picnicking and whatnot. But I agree too that especially on the hot summer days, the sheriff ought to make a pass through, because once, you know, a half dozen people go over the snow fence to the beach, all of a sudden you'll have 50 out there. So I would just say that the pass through is a good idea for especially during the summer.
Anyone else? Paul Ferguson?
Yes, Matt, so you're saying the beach would not be swimmable, no pavilion usage, but people also, I think they park there and go out onto the islands. And they park there sometimes overnight to camp on the islands. I don't know whether the islands are gonna be open or not, but I just wanted to say.
Yeah, I would say, not to interrupt, I would say that if we open both gates would be, we used to have that problem at Hewlett's, because we left them open all year except when the beach was open, then we closed them at night. Well, people got locked in there numerous times because they're used to the gate being open, and then all of a sudden we closed it at 8 o'clock and there's cars in there. But, you know, my lifeguards and stuff, they're not supposed to stay later than 8, you know, they can make reasonable accommodations, but people get locked in there. So I mean, I would like to leave both gates unlocked once we have our snow fences and safety, signs in place. And we did get a bunch of signs about social distancing and everything else from the state last week that we're going to start putting up. I guess the only signs we would need is the beach closed. And they do have, which she told me, I think it's the Cherry Plains State Park. They are closing. They're doing the same thing. They're opening the gates, closing it, and they're actually going to leave the beach part open, and it's a swim at your own risk. And it has something to do with not putting out the buoys not making a designated swim area is how they're doing this. I'm supposed to be getting, I think, it didn't come before this meeting, all their guidelines and everything else, and I was going to bring it up to Roger and just let him review it, and see what he thinks, and then. But my idea would still be to put up the snow fence, but they are going to give me some guidance on how they're doing their parks this way.
Sue Clary, did you have your hand up? You have to unmute again. There you go.
We talked about what the state guidelines are for camps and Lake Lauderdale and Lake Lauderdale swim program. They have talked about not doing the swim program. They're not going to do that, but they're talking about doing the camp. Matt, have you heard about this?
No, Sue, and basically I would say it's up to us whether we let them do that or not.
Right.
And they have to come to me first and put in a request. It's definitely not something they can just advertise they're doing without ours, getting the okay like normal.
That's what it was.
I would say right now that the swim programs would have to be closed this summer because we're not going to be there and we're not going to be involved. We're not opening bathrooms or pavilions, and they counted on all that.
Okay. That's what I was wondering because, I mean, they've been talking through the Cambridge. They've been talking about it. I think they sent the flyers out. Okay. They were taking registrations. And so.
This would be a good time to let them know.
I'll call Lindsay Shanner today. Yeah, and we'll see where we're at. But could they would have to call you even, I mean, because now they're talking about just doing a camp rather than swim lessons.
Right. When they send us a request of what they're doing, I'll bring it back to the committee, but I would say if we're going to be closed and we're not staffing, it would require them to do different, stuff, even if they were doing a camp. I would bring it back here before I told them no, and I would, but it would have to definitely come through us.
Okay, Matt.
I would hope they wouldn't advertise it so much that, they get a lot of response before they've even asked us. That would be kind of putting the cart ahead.
I will have Lindsay Shanner get a hold of you, if that's okay. Okay. And also, there are people swimming down there already.
Oh, I'm sure.
So, just so you know.
I'm sure.
Thank you.
At some point in time, if the governor opens everything up, June, July, whenever, are we gonna have time to get our hired hands on to open? Or is this just gonna be a county decision to close them no matter what?
From the staffing and organizing the parks, I would say we're making a decision now for the year. I don't think we could recover, and that's a lot of my concern is all of a sudden July, everything has changed and people want to do things. We are going to have a black eye for not having that beach open. I mean, that's part of the consequence, and I know, any of the supervisors that are in that area, they're going to be hearing it. They hear about everything. So be prepared come July, August. I mean, whatever your answer is to your constituents, it is, but we would be making a decision for the summer.
Okay, is there any other questions from the board? Okay, so you would like a motion to approve what you've just discussed, the snow fence, hiring nobody, that's what we're after.
That's what I'd like a motion to open the gates of the parks, you know, fence off the areas of concern, you know, that we just, the beaches and the, pavilions. And, you know, I guess that would be it, right? And not staff it for the summer with the proper signage, you know. Kind of
Our only staff will be buildings and ground staff at least a couple of days a week.
Sure.
Okay,
I don't know how you want to write that motion. It's a long one.
so, do I have a motion to go ahead with that?
I'll move it.
Moved by Matt Hicks, second. Second by Dana Half. Any other discussion?
I'm staying up here in Whitehall and concerning Hewlett's, I think I'm gonna have to go against that.
Okay. Paul Ferguson?
I would also be against it too, because, you know, I think we're a little premature on closing it for the year, so.
So let's have a roll call vote then.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Mr. Odell,
No,
Mr. Half,
Yes.
Mr. Hicks,
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien,
Yes.
Mr. Ferguson,
No,
Mr. Lozoff.
No.
1, 2, 3, 4. 4 yes. 4 out of 7, you're approved.
We passed, so that's what we're gonna do is what Matt suggested. Okay. So was that it for buildings and grounds?
That's it for parks. I do need to go back to buildings and grounds.
Okay,
The projects that were approved for this year under our capital plan, which we were in the process of starting engineering and everything, a couple of the, you know, important ones were the roof over at Burgoyne. Unfortunately, the roof is not getting in any better shape. I did halt all projects when this happened, including, I think I pulled back in a bid for services. I guess I'm looking for guidance. I think the one thing, if I had to prioritize between all my projects and what could happen this year in the quickest, that roof is still a major problem. And I understand there's probably going to be financial repercussions. That is something that we are close to the emergency stage with, is the roof. I
you think it's worse than the one was here when we replaced it?
I wasn't here when we replaced that one.
I mean, we had buckets everywhere.
Yeah, there's buckets everywhere over there. What I could say is I could probably push back some of the other projects that I was, you know, that were in the capital plan that were, you know, I think we had decided they were funded. I don't know, we were still looking on how to pay for the roof. It was, when this all happened, we were really in the mix of it. And we had approved to do the engineering. And I did put a stop on the engineering at the time also, just for one, they were closing shop. The engineers aren't really working, they're working from home and different things, and they're only doing, really essential stuff. So before I call and give them any guidance, because they are asking now, like, what are we doing? I guess I'm looking for guidance on that roof. I mean, it's a big project. We've talked about it. You know, we beat it to death, but it is something that needs to be done. I'd like to start back up the engineering again.
So are all capital projects on hold at the moment?
All of mine are.
All of yours are on hold?
Yes.
And the only one that you think raises the priority level is this roof?
Yes.
And you'd like to go through with the engineering with
The
the process,
engineering,
and we're actually
right.
gonna do the roof?
Right, we're gonna do the roof, so the engineering, at some point, we're gonna have to do the roof. The engineering was already approved, I guess, probably the money's still there, Chris could answer this. Just because we had stopped the engineering, I'd like to keep the engineering going, so we can get a true sense, because when that's done, we're gonna have a better idea what this roof is actually gonna cost. I mean, the number was still floating, it was just estimated at, I think, $1 million or something in the capital plan, but we'd like to know what it's gonna cost. In order to do that, we have to finish the engineering.
And if you don't fix the roof, everything will be floating.
Well, yeah, it needs it, I don't.
Okay. Board, any questions? John Rozell?
From even before we made the final purchases of the Hudson Falls School, the roof has been mentioned. And I'm gonna back Matt 100%. That roof has got to be fixed before we proceed on inside, doing any work inside the building. We're just wasting money if we don't fix the roof.
Okay. Matt Hicks?
So Matt, all you're talking about for 2020 is to continue the engineering work, which was estimated, I don't remember, $55,000 or something like that. And that's the only thing we're looking at proceeding at this point. Is that correct?
That's what I'm asking for permission to proceed with, yeah.
And then once we get that information on the status of the roof, the potential pricing of the roof, the engineering of the roof, you'll come back to us in a month or 2 months and 3 months and give us that information. And at that point, we can decide again how or when to move forward, correct?
Correct. It's the same process. It was okay before. This is almost like an update, and I know with everything going on, I wanted to bring it back in front of everybody again, but yes.
And what was the engineering number approximate, and is that something we sort of have in balance and funds ready to go? Do you recall?
I'm gonna let Chris go on to this because he's probably quicker. I don't have that number off the top of my head.
I think, yes, we have the funds, they were appropriated within the capital project, waiting for my, computer to open up the capital project. Bear with me.
For some reason, 55 sticks in my head, but I could be way off.
I think what we did the motion for was 10 to 15% of the total, what estimate it was or something. So if you're talking, I think it was 55.
$65,000 is what I have on my project detail.
Okay, I'd be in supportive to move forward in that in 2020 and then revisit it when we get the information back. Along with John.
Anyone else? And because it's already passed, we're just giving him the okay at this point to go ahead?
Yeah, unless you wanted to do something different, I guess we've already approved this.
Yeah, so,
We're moving.
okay.
More of an update. And I guess another update, talking about Burgoyne is, they requested a extension of their lease only by, a month or two, so.
If needed, yeah.
If needed, but I think from what I've been told is they're gonna need it. So we were just gonna do a prorated, contract for the 2 months. So there is a chance, if they do stay, that there's a little extra revenue than what we had expected.
It's about $5,000.
Okay. Any questions on any of that? Very good. Is that it for buildings and grounds?
Yeah.
Anything more?
No.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Keezy. Okay, Chris, is there anything more you wanted to bring up, the government ops as a whole, any of our policies, anything that you wanted to discuss so that?
Yes.
I can't hear Chris.
How about that, Mr. Hicks? Should we try that?
Is that better? Yeah, thumbs up.
Based on a request from the Superintendent of Public Works, we we thought that perhaps we should put in place a countywide cloth face covering policy. And let me see if I can figure out how to do this. I'm not that smart, so bear with me a second. See if I can pull it up here for you. All right, I'm going to try to share my screen and not break the whole thing. Okay, so hopefully you can see a draft Word document in front of you. That is a countywide face mask or face covering policy that we worked up last night. And the meat of it is that the first long run-on sentence basically just says that whenever the use of cloth face coverings is deemed necessary for the protection of health, safety, and welfare by some competent public health authority. So we enumerate the Centers for Disease Control, State Department of Health, or the chairman of the Washington County Board of Supervisors. And then the meat of it is this. All employees of Washington County are hereby required to wear cloth face coverings while discharging their official duties whenever adequate social distancing cannot be achieved or there is a reasonable chance that social distancing guidelines could be violated through the actions of others. So the plain language explanation would be, as we start to bring employees back to work, if you're not in your own office by yourself, you've got to wear a cloth face covering. And even if you're currently 6 feet from somebody, but there's, you're in the hallway and there's people walking around, you would be required to wear a cloth face covering. This is broad and somewhat generic, and that's on purpose because this would be the countywide policy, and then I kind of view this as the way we operate under state laws, where this would be the umbrella policy. Each department, with the approval of you all or whomever, would have the ability to make a more restrictive policy, but this is the least restrictive that has to be in place. So everybody could make something that requires more use, but nobody could make anything that's department specific that could be less stringent than this. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay. I can't see the whole screen to know if anybody's got any questions.
Unshare.
Then I do unshare. Oh, okay. I see what you're saying.
There you go.
There you go.
Okay, so does anybody have any questions on that? Matt Hicks.
Okay, so that would be the generic one, Chris, and then department heads in consultation with whoever could supplement that and make it different based upon what their exact situation is in their department?
Yes.
Okay, makes sense.
Anyone else? Jay Scully.
So, I mean, who should the department heads go to? Should they be sitting down with the safety officer and the public health nurse and just going over stuff so that that they are approved what the plan is? I mean, we keep kicking it around to whoever says what's the rule, but who determines the rule? Should it be the public safety officer and the public health helping these departments?
Well, I characterize it as the rule's gonna be you're wearing a mask unless you have your own office and you're the only one in it. Because you don't know when else you're gonna encounter somebody. So you can make it narrower, but the default rule is you're wearing a mask. And so specific exceptions would be entertained by the public health department.
Okay, yeah, I was just wondering because I know that Deb had concerns that should she have, 4 or 5 people in a truck or should she have 2 people in a truck or 1, that was my concern.
You want to address that, Chris, at all, or?
Well, if I'm understanding correctly, I think Mr. Skelly's question is really if a department wants to make a sub-policy, for lack of a better term, who is the authorizing authority? I would agree with Roger in that my preference would be for it to be public health. But I know that there has been some expression from the board of wanting to weigh in on those department-specific things. That wouldn't be my recommendation, but certainly if that's what the board wants to do, we would require that direction from you. But I think as we stand right now, public health would be the authority to sign off on any sub-policies.
Well, I think the simpler question, where Jay was coming as the head of DPW was, are we putting 4 people in the truck if they have masks on, is that fine? Or is that not fine? I think that's where he was coming from.
And I guess my answer to that question would be that's for public health to weigh in on. I don't know.
Okay.
The real question is, what are the alternatives? Because rule 1 is everybody wears a mask. Rule 2 is you don't go out. Well, we're already, unless you have to. So now we're saying you have to go out. Rule 3 is if you have to go out, you must social distance. Okay? So the question is, what alternatives do we have to putting 4 people in a truck? If there are no alternatives to putting 4 people in a, and you're wearing a mask during 1 and 2. Okay? Right. Well, you're not wearing a mask at home, but if you go out, you're wearing a mask. So you're always wearing a mask. The question is, what alternatives do we have to ensure proper social distancing? And 4 dump trucks driving 4 guys to 1 location probably isn't the one we're going to use.
No, but a foreman's truck where you have people in corners, again, is a whole different deal.
We're going to talk with public health and say, okay, what's the safest way possible to accomplish this goal of getting here, consistent with the equipment that we have? And public health would say, you can do it this way. It's not ideal, but you can do it. So, again, there are going to be unique specific circumstances. The general policy, I think, was drafted for most of the office building and things like that. So folks just interacting in hallways, folks interacting in the bullpen situations and things like that. There's always, because we're such a broad-oriented, a broad operation where we have different things going on. We aren't all accountants. We're not all whatever. There are going to be different situations that are going to be the exception to the rule. We just can't have one broad rule that fits everybody because of the diversity of the operation. So those should be entertained by people, in this case, public health, who know what the heck they're talking about.
Okay.
And then we'll have to come back to you and say, or come back to the superintendent. Public health says, no, just absolutely, we don't want 4 guys in the truck, no way, no how. Then the board goes to recommendation, would come back to the committee or perhaps the board, and they would have to look at public health's recommendation, operational necessity, and make a decision.
Okay. Is there a way that can, it's nice that the board hears it and knows it. Is there a way that'll happen? We don't have to have a meeting for this. This will happen without us, I assume. And we will be told what the recommendation was from public health so that we're moving forward and getting there faster.
I would have to think that as long as Deb can accomplish her mission with what she's given, she'll do that.
That's what I'm saying.
And if there's a problem raised where either public health says, you can't do that, and Deb has to go back and say, I can't accomplish my mission under these parameters, then there will be something that will have to be decided by the board. But if the parameters are within what Deb has to operate with, she operates, just like she does now.
Excellent.
It's no different.
So can I chime in?
Certainly.
So this is not really going to be as much of an issue for the first 2 weeks if we go back at 50% and we're staying at our barns. So we're going to be able to work this out. My original concern with the face mask thing was the fact that about a month or so ago, we got an email saying that we had to sign for wearing them. And I just wanted to know what we were going to do with that. Are we going to have to require everybody to sign stuff? Or is that just policy that you follow the rules like most things are without signing anything? And I'm sure that we can work out the truck thing as long as we get the basics going on what is expected in a safe manner. And Phil and I spent all day yesterday working on it. So we're getting relatively confident.
What you had to sign originally was, number 1, a receipt that we gave you the mask for people that are here now. And number 2, your understanding that you had to wear it. So your guys will either have to be signed off on training, and my understanding is since they're going to be in the barns, we're going to do some return to work training.
Yep.
I think we ought to probably come back with the form and then tell them what they're supposed to be looking for, and then come back with the guys to say, okay, this is what you have to do, and then they're going to have to be spot checks. Because if they're all in the barn, for example, then yes, they should all be masked because they're going to be in that proximity to each other. They're going to be in the same work area, and they're going to be inevitably going past each other and things like that. As you get out into the field, that may change. But yes, the default rule is gonna be, when you're in proximity to other people, you wear a mask. And then in certain situations, so I'm up on top of the paver and you're behind the paver, we probably got enough distance outside that we're good enough to go. And we'll address those things as we come along.
Okay.
Very good.
Did that clear everything up for everybody? I guess we're good. Any other policy issues?
That was the only policy. Do we want to entertain a motion to adopt this?
Okay. Motion to adopt the policy as it was presented.
So move, Brian.
Moved by Mr. O'Brien. Second?
John Rozell, second.
Mr. Rozell? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Guess it passed. Okay, is that it?
I believe so.
Okay. Dan Cha?
Yeah, will this be put in writing so that we all can review it afterwards, so we see, so we all understand it, right?
It was in writing. It was on.
Is it in writing now?
Yep.
Oh, it was on the screen. You can't see it. Okay.
Oh, it is? Okay,
Yeah.
sorry.
Okay, very good. So we're adjourned and we're gonna go right directly, or are we recessing for a minute, or?
Take 5 minutes.
Okay.
5 minutes.
5 minutes and we're back to, finance.
Sorry, I blew it first.
Look for buried treasure.
It's not far, but I don't know.
Okay, I'd like to call
I'd
the Finance Committee meeting for the month of May to order. And we will proceed to approve the minutes of our last meeting, correct? Is that necessary? Okay. Has everybody had an opportunity to review the minutes? And if so, I would entertain a motion.
So moved, Dan.
Dave O'Brien moved it. Do I have a second? Brian Campbell seconds it. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I hear no opposition, they are approved. We're going to start with department reports and requests. Real property, do we have Laura on the line? Or did she take care of business earlier? Tim, do you know if she's?
I just saw her name on there. I think she's coming back.
Laura, are you there? Muted, it says.
I sure is unmuted. But I don't see her video. I see her box there.
We'll come back to her if she gets on the line. Treasurer's report. Mr. Nolet.
Good morning, everyone. If Big Brother will allow me to share my screen, I can run you through the documents real quick.
Now, who's sharing this?
Okay, can you hear me? You are muted. Press
Who do we have now, Laura?
Yeah, I'm trying to get there. Hold on.
Al, excuse me, Laura. Al, can you hold off 1 second? We have Laura.
Yes, sir.
Okay, go ahead, Laura. You're muted again, Laura. You're still muted, Laura.
I'm trying to
There we
unmute.
go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. I'm going from double screen to single screens and working across the hall. I could come if you need me, but my only thing I had on the agenda is we did obtain a cell phone for one of our workers, which will be used by my assessor out in the field and to answer calls. I needed to get a resolution to move funds from a grant account that I had from prior into either, I don't know how it works, a cell phone account, or if it goes into my actual phone line, because we've never had a cell phone before.
What would be the appropriate way of doing that? Would it be you, Chris, or Al make a recommendation which account to put it into?
It'll go to the telephone line.
Cell phone line.
Okay,
Telephone.
perfect.
Telephone line.
Telephone line? Telephone line. Laura.
Okay.
Discussion on this request by Laura? Al Nolet.
Do we have a dollar amount?
I did on my request that I sent over. Hold on a second. It's $320. Let's say 350, just in case. And that would be for the 2020 year.
Do I have a motion to move that money?
I'll move it, Dan.
Okay, motion by Dave O'Brien. Do I have a second? Lester Losaw seconds. Discussion. Concerns or comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I,
Thank you.
I think opposed. I didn't see many ayes, but maybe they were all there. None opposed, so the motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. That is, clear your desk for, okay,
My
very
desk is
good.
not clear, but this is all I had on the agenda. Thank you.
Okay, does anyone have any other questions for Laura while she's right here present? If not, we're gonna move on to the treasurer. Al, you have the floor.
Thank you, sir. Can you all see my screen now?
I can see you.
Oh,
We just have you.
How about now?
Yes.
Now we have sales tax recap.
Okay. So what's interesting and unfortunate, it appears that the hit to our sales tax is happening considerably sooner than we thought it would. The first deposit in May was down $455,000 over this time last year. There's another deposit tomorrow, and I'd be very interested to see what happens with that deposit. I will report it out to the board as soon as I get it in, so that you have that information for Friday morning. The only thing I can do is say stay tuned, because this, like I said, is earlier than I thought it was going to be, so don't really know what the impact on sales tax is going to be. This packet, of course, will be attached to the minutes after the meeting, so you'll have it to refer back to as well. I did start the measurement for next year's distribution. We're not, obviously we're not too far off track right now. We're already over the, if you remember, before you went to a 7%, you had a flat $1 million. So right now, no matter what the deposits come in at, you're still going to get more than you used to get under the old measurement. So if you remember last time we met, which I think was on May 1st, I said it would be 2022 when you felt the impact of sales tax. This just kind of confirms that. The next page that I have in the packet for you, part of the $455,000 that we were down from this deposit contains the Washington County $90,000, $97,000 to the villages. If you remember, they swept their sales tax. Villages are done in May. So 90,000 of the 455 was actually related to the AIM sweep. The last column on this document, when you get it, the counties that reported how much they were down in sales tax, I have put on here so you can kind of see statewide this happened to everybody. It wasn't specific to Washington County. The next page in the packet that you'll see is every year I give you a recap of the unpaid taxes that were turned over to me on April 1st. The interesting thing this year is there was 60 more parcels turned over unpaid, which on its face would look like a bad thing. What's interesting, however, though, is they turned over $1.1 million less in taxes. So even though there was more parcels, the amount that we have to collect actually went down by $1.1 million. So the adjusted warrants went up $5 million and they turned over $1.1 million less. So that's actually good news, believe it or not. Where the county's on the hook for a lot less money than in past years, even though the levy went up in total by $5 million. So the return rate went from 15.36% down to 12.49%. So 2.87% decrease in the amount of taxes turned over to us. So actually something positive to report for a change. The next 4 pages for you are your normal budget to actuals. There's not a lot that I want to talk about yet on the budget to actuals because where a lot of the variances are right now, you'll see that expenses are down by $1.1 million over this time last year, but a lot of that is things that just haven't happened yet. We haven't done the distribution to ACC yet. That will be done this week. We haven't done your sales tax distribution to the towns, which will be done as part of audit on Friday. We haven't had to transfer any interfund loan money to the county road fund. So even though it looks like we're down 1.1 million in expenses right now, it's not apples to apples because there's a bunch of items, big ticket items that just haven't happened yet. I don't have anything more as far as this packet to talk about. I know you probably have a lot to discuss this morning, so I'm not going to keep you any longer unless you have specific questions. Obviously, we'll have more to talk about later, but that's as far as my regular packet to you goes.
Does anyone have any questions for Al on his presentation? John?
Last meeting, you made a statement that when the state is down so much money, the county loses so much. Like I think you said that if the state was down $1 million, that would cut down the county by 70,000.
No, that was a discussion about sales tax, Mr. Rizal.
Right.
Because of your 7% distribution, for every $1 million, it's a $70,000 effect on the towns. That's what it was sales tax related we were talking about.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to clear that up in my mind.
So because our measurement period goes from August to July, you won't actually feel the impact of this year's decrease really until the next distribution, which will be for 2022.
Are you all set, John, or do you have more?
Oh, I'm all set. Just want to get it straight in my head.
Anyone else have a question for Al? Okay, thank you. Al. Next on Matt, no, the screen wasn't up, I'm sorry. It's up now, I see all kinds of hands. Hi, everybody, good to see you. Matt, start with you.
Al, can we just have somebody email that information you just presented to us today, so we haven't got to wait till Friday to get that?
I'd be more than happy to do that, Matt.
Thank you.
Okay, Dana Half, I think you were next.
Thank you. Al, I think quite a few towns are preparing for our 2021 budget and to have some contractions. Can you explain how 2021 will not really, the towns will not really see an effect on the sales tax distribution from the county? How does that work? Why does it wait till 2022?
So when you get this packet, Mr. Half, you'll see off to the right, I've actually started the distribution column that shows, because the measurement for next year's distribution, 2021, it actually goes from August 1st of 2019 to July 31st of 2020. That's the measurement period. So you're already into May with only, June and July left. You only have 2 months. Technically, you're only going to have 3 months of the COVID impact and 9 months of our 5 or 6% growth that we were experiencing. So those 3 months won't be enough to drastically change the distribution. You're already at $1.2 million, and which is down from last year, but not as significant as it's going to be if the sales tax continues to trend down this year and we don't recover. The August 1st of 2020 to July 31st of 2021 will be the period of time that you actually take a bigger hit, which will be the distribution for your 2022 budget.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions for Al? I see no hands up. We will move on then to County Administrator.
Thank you, Mr. Budget Officer. All right, we'll start with some housekeeping stuff. As the Superintendent of Public Works mentioned in the DPW committee, we have a federal highway aid eligible pavement preservation project scheduled for County Route 46. We have let the bids for that project. The bids are back. We would like a resolution to award that contract for the pavement preservation of County Route 46 to Evolution Construction of Mechanicville in the amount of $485,238.88.
Now, Chris, this was brought up in DPW today, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so this is the one that was discussed in Jay's committees. Any questions before I entertain a motion to do this? If not, a motion to award the contract?
So moved.
Who moved that?
I think that was Mr. Half.
Mr. Half? No, was it you, Jay, that moved it? Yeah. Okay, great. Do I have a second? Cassie Fedler seconds it. Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Also coming out of the Public Works Committee, the superintendent had requested a budget amendment for the purchase of signs and sign blanks that was approved by the Public Works Committee. So if we could have a motion to approve that one.
Motion to move that to the full board?
So moved.
Motion by Brian Campbell, seconded by, I saw several hands. Cassie's hands came up. Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you. And another item coming out of the Public Works Committee was the superintendent's request to copy what we did last year with regard to the previous practice for the department had been to use the Highway Worker 3 title in an as-needed basis. Last year on a trial basis, she implemented the permanent elevation of qualifying Highway Worker 2s to the Highway Worker 3 position for the duration of the construction season as defined in the Teamsters Collective Bargaining Agreement. She has asked for permission to do that again this year. In looking back over some of the previous documentation, should the Finance Committee recommend this to the full board, I'd be asking for an amendment to the staffing pattern. The budget is already in place, and the authorization for the chairman to sign a memorandum of agreement with the Teamsters Collective Bargaining Agreement memorializing the temporary elevation of qualifying highway worker 2s to the highway worker 3 position and pay for the duration of the construction season.
Chris, can this be, or should I ask Roger, can this be one resolution, or does it have to be two?
No, it's one.
One? So moved. So moved by Brian Campbell. Do I have a second?
Second.
Cassie Fedler and Jay Skelly. Now discussion. Is it clear with everyone what we're voting on? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Thank you. Okay, I don't know, I will defer to the budget officer and the treasurer on this. The last item that I had coming out of the Public Works Committee was the discussion regarding the carpool fund. And I believe that everybody yesterday via email received a proposal from the treasurer as to possible actions to take to rectify that situation. Would we like to discuss that now?
Yes, it's time for that. Did everybody receive that email with the treasurer's, county treasurer's recommendation on to restructure carpool funding? And if so, I would like to add that Chris and I reviewed that with the county treasurer this morning. So do we want to enter into some discussion on this? I can add what I talked about with Chris and Alan. It boils down to, we have two options, really. We have to come up with some money to fund carpool. One is to take it out of fund balance, $360,000 to get this corrected. And then there's, we're going to have to, even if we do that, regardless of what we do, we're going to have to increase the rates to carpool. And I realize I'm looking at Al Nolet, who explained it all to me, and I should let him explain it all to you. Al, would you please take the floor over before I confuse everybody?
Sure, thank you, Chairman. And as in my document, I have a short-term and a long-term solution. Really, what I would like the Finance Committee to consider today is at least the short-term piece of it. The long-term restructuring, I think, is a more appropriate conversation for our budget workshops. Not that I won't talk about it today, but it's something that can actually be deferred to a later date. What really I need action on today is the immediate Band-Aid that the fund needs. So today I would be looking for the Finance Committee to give some kind of direction and resolution in regards to an immediate cash flow, whether it's interfund loan or interfund transfer, to get the fund healthy enough to make it to the budget workshops to discuss their possible restructuring for next year. For those of you that got a chance to make it through the document, there is a world where we don't even have to worry about setting rates. We make it an interfund transfer every year like we do with the county road fund. But again, that can be a discussion for another time. What I would really like is some kind of discussion today about the immediate needs of the fund.
John Roselle.
I'll start. On here with your short term, did we figure out any of the line items that haven't been used for their different departments?
Did you get that question, Al?
I didn't hear it. He broke up.
Okay. Every department has their separate line item for carpool.
Yes, sir.
Is that listed on here at all in this?
In the third, it's in the recommendations just before the expenditure. There's $687,000 in general fund line items. Is what you're talking about.
Okay.
So there's $879,000 budgeted in line items across the county in 2020. So the way I look at it is there's two decisions, and each of those decisions may have spurs. The first decision is interfund transfer or interfund loan. To me, that's the first decision point. And based on that decision point, there's secondary decision points. if you're going to make it an interfund transfer, whether you just take and transfer the money from the already existing expenses, so it becomes budget neutral, where you just go from the carpool expense to the interfund transfer expense, so that I'm able to front load the fund. Or do you just go to fund balance and repay the 360 that was taken out of the fund to get it back to a healthy status? So there's two decision points. The first one is interfund loan versus interfund transfer.
So if we took the 360,000 out of general fund, that would still leave the 879 in the line items?
Yes, sir. Which we would probably, not probably, we will absolutely underspend. So some of that 360 would be returned to fund balance by the breakage in those expense accounts.
Are you all set, John?
You have Cassie, Chairman?
Yeah, I was just looking at John. Yes, Cassie, you're next. Up, you're muted. Cassie, you're still muted. There we go.
Okay. I'm in favor of the interfund transfer. I have terrible service, so I'm not going to talk much.
Second.
Now, was that a motion, Cassie, by you? It must have been that you want to do what? Do you want to take a transfer loan, interfund loan transfer, or out of fund balance? Which fund balance says Matt? Is that your motion, Cassie?
Yes, I was fund balance.
Okay. Okay, very good. Discussion on this motion. Brian Campbell.
Hey, Al, could you tell us, and maybe you don't know, what's the chances of most of that 360 coming back?
Honestly, I'd love to answer that question, Brian, but I don't know yet. Because I can tell you that the billings are down right now, but what I can't anticipate is what the billings are going to look like during the reopening, because there's going to be some things that were put aside during the closure that will have to be caught up. So some of the miles that weren't traveled during the closure, you may see a huge boom when we come back in business. So I know that there will be breakage. There's no way I can have a handle on what that breakage might be as we sit here today, because I don't know the items that are not being done during the closure.
And if we don't buy some, we're good too.
Correct.
Day to have.
Cassie made the motion, so I don't know if I should ask her or Al. Is this an interfund loan or an interfund transfer?
She motioned to interfund transfer. My question would be, is it for the full 360,000?
Yes. Everybody's nodding their heads at the motion in the second. We're on a full 360.
Why could it not be an interfund loan?
It could be either, but this was the motion that was made. If you want to argue the point, then that's your prerogative right now.
Well, the question was, will this money come back? If it's an interfund loan, the money will come back. If it's an interfund transfer, it's just giving of that money. I know Carpool is not part of the, well, it is underneath the general fund, but it's a little bit separate. So I don't know if a loan makes any sense or not.
Al, no less.
Mr. Half, my only hesitation with an interfund loan at this point is it then just kicks the can down the road. It doesn't fix the problem. It just gets me through today. So I'm not arguing not to do it, but the interfund loan just gives me a bridge to tomorrow, where the interfund transfer actually gives us time to have a logical discussion during the budget workshop.
Chris wants to add to this now too.
Yeah, Mr. Happ, you raised a good question, and we were talking about this this morning. And my response to that would be that the interfund loan will get the money back to general fund. You're 100% correct on that. But the ability for the fund to actually pay that loan off will require us to increase the mileage rate. So if we just do the loan, my strong recommendation would be that we increase the mileage rate to allow the fund to be solvent enough to pay that loan back. In which case, when we increase the mileage, it will increase the expense in general fund. And so what we kind of talked about this morning is that whether you do it as an interfund transfer or an interfund loan with a corresponding increase in mileage rate, the net effect is the same. The timing is a little bit different. If you do the interfund transfer, essentially that money moves on Friday. If you do the interfund loan and the corresponding mileage rate increase, it will play out over the course of the year, likely, that money will come out of general fund. But in the end, the net result is largely almost identical.
Thank you.
One footnote to what Chris just said. I still won't throw the whole 360 back at once if I don't have to. So authorizing the interfund transfer, I will still only cash flow what the fund needs and keep the money in general fund as long as possible. So that if for some reason things turn around 3 months from now, we can always go back in and address this 360 a second time. So Friday, if there's a resolution for the interfund transfer, I will still only do it as needed for cash flow purposes for the fund, so that it can be readdressed later if things turn around or something substantially changes for us.
Any further questions? John Rozelle?
I thought we discussed raising that cost from 45 up to 54 or something. Is that on hold, or is that going to be involved in Friday's meeting?
Al?
So at this point, Mr. Rozelle, if you do the interfund transfer authorization, we can have that conversation later, whether it's when we reopen the building or during the budget process. That conversation can actually be had later. Because under part of my plan, if you got a chance to get through the document yesterday, there's a world where we don't have to have a rate at all. So that can be part of a longer term discussion.
Any further questions or comments before we vote? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so next on my list was, you heard Elections Commissioner Allen mention it this morning in GovOps. If the committee would like to make a motion, we need to recognize the roughly, it's like $70,093 in federal CARES Act funding that is coming directly to the Board of Elections to cover COVID-19 related election expenses. If we could get a resolution or a motion rather to accept the grant, authorize the chairman to execute any and all documents required to enter into the grant, and then make the appropriate appropriations for those expenses. I think that's what we're looking for.
So moved.
Motion by Brian. Do I have a second? Lester? So Aldo would like to add to this.
Just for Debbie's reference for the motion and the resolution, it's $70,191 is the dollar amount.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Matt, discussion.
Yeah, do we really know what we're documenting for COVID-related expenses to offset this? Is that something that BOE is on top of, or what might they be?
Yeah, so Board of Elections is working with me to track those. Unfortunately, as I alluded to earlier, during government ops, once the commissioners got off the phone, we are going to have very significant costs associated with this June 23rd Democratic presidential primary. The increased expenses are going to be, if I'm remembering the number correctly, I think there's 9,700 registered Democrats in the county. We are going to have to mail each of them an absentee ballot application with a self-addressed stamped envelope for return of that application. Then there will be some percentage of that 9,700 that will opt to receive an absentee ballot. It costs $1 or $1.25 to mail each absentee ballot with the special envelopes, the ballot paper, and postage to each individual. So, that could be, normally for an election like that, we might send out a couple hundred absentee ballots. We may be looking at, 8,000, 9,000 conceivably. Then the real double whammy for this one is that originally the governor tried to pass an executive order that we would do the entire thing via absentee ballot. He can't do that because of the system of government we have, and it wasn't prior authorized. So what they've done is gotten creative with the constitutional language that allows you to select an absentee ballot for specific purposes. One of those enumerated purposes is illness. And so the second floor has gotten creative and said that fear of contracting COVID is an illness. And so therefore anybody who doesn't want to go to the polls for that fear can elect to do absentee ballot. But because he couldn't shut off in-person voting, we now have to incur all the expense of the absentee ballots and still run the physical elections. In addition to that, we've gotten guidance from the state that we are now going to be required to completely disinfect and decontaminate each poll site the day before the election and the day after the election. So I think we're likely going to have to rely on a vendor to come in and do that for us. That will be a significant expense. I'm working with the election commissioners and the buildings and grounds superintendent and my purchasing staff to figure out what we're going to do as far as some kind of physical barriers for the elections inspectors in terms of like a portable plexiglass partition that we can put in between them and the public. We're going to have to buy all sorts of, sanitizing wipes and stuff like that. So there will be a number of increased expenses that are absolutely 100% directly tied to COVID, and we are doing our darndest to document every single one of those.
The $70,000 is strictly affiliated with the Democratic primary in June?
No, that was general. It was in the first round of stimulus, the quote-unquote CARES Act, and it was very broadly based. So if we don't use the whole 70 in this primary, the balance will be available for us for the general. Who knows what kind of situation we'll be in for the general. If it's the same as this, it will be very expensive, given that it is a presidential year. So that 70,000 will help to offset that.
Thank you.
Questions, comments? So don't we have a motion and a second on the floor. Are we ready to vote? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Carried. Very good.
Okay, so this one did not come through committee, and I apologize for that, but I thought we could bring it up here. So you may remember my weeks blend together, but maybe 3 weeks ago, because of the governor's order that all non-elective procedures at hospitals had to cease immediately, Glens Falls Hospital laid off a number of employees. One of the ripple impacts of that was that they essentially, without notice, canceled our mental health contract for the jail. We scrambled and were able to get them to reinstate the service, but their provision was they wanted us to pay ahead because they were having such cash flow issues. The treasurer, and he can certainly speak to this if he needs to, really can't do that. He can't prepay for services unless he has an explicit board of supervisor's resolution, or we have a new contract with them that stipulates we have to. So if the committee is okay with it, what I would request is a motion to authorize the treasurer to prepay Glens Falls Hospital for services provided to the sheriffs and Department of Social Services for the duration that it is required by the hospital to continue the service provision.
Hey, Chris, how do you come up with that number?
What number?
Well, if you're prepaying, there's got to be a number that you're paying, right?
Oh, sure. So I think the mental health contract, and Debbie can correct me if I'm wrong, is it's an annual contract billed quarterly. So they just take the annual contract amount divided by 4, and they bill us quarterly for it. And so we're asking for permission to just pay the quarter ahead.
Okay, and if you don't use it up in that quarter?
No,
or is that contract a fixed cost regardless?
I believe that's
okay, it's a fixed cost. Okay. Sue Clary, your head's up. You are muted. There you go.
Yep. Chris,
Yep.
When you do the contracts, did you consider maybe going through Hudson Headwater for mental health? And the other piece is, when this contract was set up, how many inmates were there and how many are now? And was it based on, the population of the correctional facility?
So unfortunately, I don't know the details of the contract. I was not involved in the procurement of the contract, and I don't know the details of it. I can certainly look into those things. I think the part of the reason that this precipitated was that there was a no warning cancellation of the contract, and we have an obligation to continue those services. So I think you raised some very valid points that we should look into. Are there other providers that can do it that may be more stable? And are there efficiencies we can find there? I think if nothing else, maybe we should move forward with this so that we can continue the service while we look into some of those other things.
Chris, I actually, when we had the audit last month, I think it came across, is it 30,000 for the mental health contract per quarter?
I believe that might have been one of Rob York's contracts, because I think this one only goes in quarterly, but I could be wrong.
Yeah. I know, just seeing one of them for mental health I actually was going to ask you about it, because I think at that point there was like 44 inmates. And I think that contract only was, it was Dr. Barry, it was the therapist that come in, Lisa LaRock probably. And thinking about, that's not medication, it's just the labor part. And if it's gone from down to 44 or wherever the inmate status is, it might be worth reviewing and actually changing.
Good point.
Thank you, Sue. Brian, you have a question?
Yeah, so the contract though was signed for the year. We've already signed the contract. They've just terminated it because of lack of funding or whatever.
Right.
So we're trying to just finish out the years that we were going, Chris. And so by doing this, we're just fulfilling the rest of this contract.
So I apologize for not having more details at my fingertips, but basically this was an emergency situation because of the financial crisis that the hospital found themselves in. This is a stopgap measure to continue the services in the immediate future. But to both yours and Mrs. Clary's point, I think, maybe this will get us breathing room, and maybe as part of the budget, we look at those contracts more closely and look at going out for a procurement if there are other vendors that might be able to do it, or even if with the same vendor we can, find some savings if, as to Mrs. Clary's point, that our inmate count is down. But yes,
this is basically fulfilling the full year's contract.
This is trying to continue the current contract that we're in just because of the financial crisis the hospital found itself in.
Sue?
One more question. Are the people that are normally doing the service, are they on furlough? Are they doing the service?
So they were furloughed. We had some emergency communications with the hospital, and we said we would do everything in our power to get them the money up front. And because we made that offer to them, they put the people back on the payroll and are currently doing the service.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Chris on this? Alan Olet.
And just to piggyback on what Chris said a little bit, all we're looking for right now is just a change in the way that we pay them. As Chris said, the contract is in place for 2020. And just so that the board's aware, we already do this with Rob York's mental health contracts. His contracts with the hospital are written in such a way that they get advanced at the beginning of the quarter. So we are already doing this in another program. I just need the authority to do it from you all. It's just a change in how we pay them. Rather than being billed after the fact, we're going to pay them in advance like we do with Rob York's programs. So it's not something we're not already doing. I just need the authority to do it.
So moved.
Motion by Brian to move this, seconded by Sue Clary and Lester Losaw. Any questions? I see no hands up. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Carried.
Thank you, Chris.
Next.
Okay, thank you. So just yesterday, an issue came up. So as I think we've mentioned before in public safety, although I don't think it came up in the last committee meeting, public safety has experienced 2 resignations in the permanent full-time dispatcher ranks. And of a pool of 12 per diems. They currently only have 2 active per diems. So they've been chronically short-staffed down there for right now. A fully trained former employee who went to work for another county is now interested in coming back to work for us. What the department is requesting is permission to fill a current vacancy with this individual and to place this individual on the 4th step of the UPSEU collective bargaining agreement pay scale. The reason being that that person does have the 4 years with the department. They left and are coming back.
And there's no training cost.
Correct, that's where I was going. So there's several issues with this, but one is that we really can't train right now because of social distancing, because what physically is involved in training a new dispatcher is a training officer sitting directly next to the trainee and going through calls for a period of several months. And in addition, that training costs us on average almost $10,000, $16,000 per new dispatcher. The differential, I asked Tim to work up on this based on kind of the base rate person that was leaving, and if we hired this person in at the 4th step for the rest of the year, it would be a $2,600 difference in pay, and that pales in comparison to if we use half a year, the $8,000 we would incur for training somebody. So I think it's a prudent financial move, and it helps address the significant staffing shortage that they have, which is problematic for obvious reasons. So if possible, it would be a motion to approve the filling of this position and to place this individual on the 4th step of the UPSEU collective bargaining agreement pay scale.
And if everybody heard that, Brian moved that resolution. Do I have a second? Second by Cassie Fedler and Don Ward. Discussion. Yes, Matt.
No issues with the union on having somebody jump in at that level, Chris?
We don't anticipate any, no.
All right, thank you.
I don't know. When a light comes on, does that mean that Dana Hogan lit up? But I don't know if he had a question.
No, I was just unmuting, Dan.
Okay. And any other questions before we vote? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Carried.
Thank you very much. Okay, this is, at this point, just an FYI, and I apologize to Mr. Campbell. I perhaps should have brought this up in government ops. It was just on my finance list. I apologize. So oddly enough, I think it was last week, Public Health and DSS were experiencing significant phone issues, and come to find out somehow our phone system was overwhelmed. Now, this seems counterintuitive given that we only have about 25 to 30% of our staff here in the building currently. But what it boils down to is that the way our current phone system is constructed is that there's over 500 extensions or phones in the county, and we have a total of 46 lines that come in and out. And so if people are placed on hold, that ties up a line. And with the number of calls that Public Health is doing and the call volume in some other departments, those 46 trunk lines were getting eaten up very quickly, and I believe Public Safety was experiencing some issues with incoming calls. The majority of our issues were with outgoing calls. So with the understanding that we maxed out the phone system when it wasn't the height of heat season, and we only had 25 or 30% of our staff here, we were trying to look ahead and saying that when we reopen, as we talked about before with the carpool, there is going to be a huge glut of activity that has not occurred during the, what are we on, 8 weeks of shutdown or so, that will have to be done when we bring people back in here. And so I certainly expect that our phone traffic will be up over normal when we bring folks back. And wanting to avoid an ongoing phone issue then, I asked Tim and Matt and Terry and Sue to start looking into our options. So they worked really closely with our vendor. They've come up with an option that will allow us to migrate from the 46 trunk lines to 100 lines. The initial cost is really the big nut. It's going to be around $15,000 probably.
$13,345.
So $13,345.
To add to that, though, our phone bill will be $100 less per month going to this system than it is now.
Okay, so if you couldn't hear it, we will save $1,200 a year after spending the $13,345 up front. The other advantage of that is that, once we're at 100 lines and we switch over to this new, system, the new technology, we can add lines very easily and extremely quickly. So if we were at 100 lines and we found out that that just was not doing it and we needed to jump to 125 or 150, it's literally a call to our rep, and then we can put it in place. So now that we have the firm number, I guess I would, if the finance committee, if we can answer your questions, I see that Mr. Ward has a question. We'd like to move forward with this with your approval.
Matt, is this coming out of your budget? Well, you had the number, so.
This could come out of our budget as far as, a repair to our system.
So my preference at this point, if the finance committee supports us moving forward with this, I would like to bill it to the COVID account and see, I think I can make a very compelling argument that this is directly related to COVID. We've had this phone system since the earth was new, and we're only having to change it now because of our response to COVID. So I'd like to make the argument that it is a COVID expense, and then if we fail, we can take it out of contingency or Matt's budget.
Aldo wants to add to this.
Yep, and along the lines of what Chris just said, I would encourage a conversation with Tina as well, because she has additional Homeland Security money in response to this COVID event also, that it might be, she might be able to get that through her additional funding as well, because her department really was the spike in the phone lines, the need for the phone lines. So Chris can have a conversation with Tina McDougall about which whether it's the FEMA funding or the Homeland Security public health funding, but there are two different streams that are potentially eligible to grab that initial cost appropriately.
Thank you. Don Ward, your hand's been up a couple times. Were you directing it towards me?
No, I was telling people I was at a conference call.
Okay. So to summarize this, the cost is going to be a little over $13,000, but it's going to save us $100 a month, you said?
$1,200 a year.
And possibly we could reclaim the cost. So that kind of summarizes up the presentation. Brian has a question first.
So we have an 11-year payback, I feel better. But my question is, who does the work, how quickly does the work happen? I mean, I'm hoping we don't do this today and next February they install it.
We're working on a timeline now. I would say it could happen within the next couple of weeks. We're at max and it's getting worse, 3 days a week. It is all COVID, I mean, it's 100% COVID related. We have had problems in the past every year during heat season, but it's only a short amount of time and we can work around it. But, to echo Chris's feeling, a lot more stuff is gonna happen over the phone when we come back. And we're only at half staff now. Just a rundown on the phone, just a quick technical end of it. When you have 46 lines at 60% capacity, you start getting busy tone. People calling in or this or that, if you're calling in. At 80%, you get of the volume, so at whatever that equals, say 34 or something like that, you get, a certain percentage more of busy tone, and then you can't call out or call in. At 100%, you pretty much fall off our system. There's nothing happening.
So who does the work? Are we doing the work in-house?
Twin State,
Our vendor.
our vendor does most of it. My guy, Alan, our tech guy, he will be involved in the process, and there will be things that he has to do, but that would be just under his normal.
And there's no problem with getting them in the building to do it and?
No. This is something they have been doing in response to the COVID. That's how we can make this happen so quick. They actually have a thing that other municipalities, other businesses have had the same problems when people work from home or this or that. So this is something they're doing every day.
Any further questions before we take action on this? I'd entertain a motion then to move forward. Brian Campbell makes that motion. Do I have a second? Jay Skelly?
Second.
And Dave O'Brien. Discussion. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Carried. Chris?
Okay, so that was all I had as far as budget amendments and approvals and things like that. I think I'll just give the board a quick update on what transpired at the state level yesterday, and then I'll turn it over to you all. So as you likely heard, the governor came out yesterday and announced that 3 regions in the state had met his 7 criteria for reopening. That was the Finger Lakes, the Southern Tier, and the Mohawk Valley. So we are gaining some information based on what's happening with those regions. So they are able to start opening on Friday, May 15th. The way he's described the process so far is that the next regions will be evaluated for compliance with the criteria in 2-week increments. So, trying to piece all this together because nothing's in writing and nothing is clear, but the best we can figure out, that means the week of Memorial Day, we expect the governor to make an announcement as to what regions are next in line to be open. And then those regions would open June 1st. Currently, we are meeting as of last night on the dashboard, Capital Region, we were meeting every criteria that we have control of. The 2 criteria we were not meeting was the 14-day decline in hospitalizations and the 14-day decline in deaths. So, the local governments have done everything they can to meet the criteria established by the government. By the governor, at this point, we are just waiting on the infections and the deaths to come down, or the hospitalizations to come down. What was interesting is if you look at the governor's 4 phases of reopening, government is not listed anywhere. And we kind of pinged the second floor on this a couple of times and not gotten any clear guidance. So in talking to my colleagues in the Finger Lakes last night, since they are opening, they finally got some guidance from the governor that government is going to be in phase 2. So there's 2 weeks in between each set of regions opening, and then there's 2 weeks in between each phase of reopening. So if we take a best case scenario for the Capital Region, we would get an announcement the last week, and again, this is all hypothesizing and trying to cobble together what little information we have because nothing is clear, but I just want to share the best information we have at this moment. So if everything went perfectly, the last week in May, the Capital Region would be announced that they could reopen. Reopening would begin June 1st. That would be phase 1 with construction and low-risk manufacturing, whatever in the world that means. 2 weeks after that, if everything continues to trend in the right direction, phase 2 can begin. And so for the county, at least as far as we know now, the earliest date we could look to reopen is June 15th, would be the beginning of phase 2 for the Capital Region if everything goes according to the timeline we know as of now and everything goes in the right direction. So that just helps us do a little bit of planning with Matt, that's why I asked him to stay up here, as far as reopening, as we start to talk about bringing DPW back, bringing other departments back, trying to ramp up and prepare. We roughly can figure that we have about a month left under the mandatory 50% staff reduction that we're currently operating on, and that, we can try to be working toward getting ourselves positioned to come back on June 15th. Now, I would throw the large asterisk after that statement that all this stuff changes daily, and again, I'm cobbling together bits and pieces of information from 15 different sources, but it's the best we have to go on at this point.
But Chris, just reiterate that has nothing to do with us getting to 50% though.
Okay, so I think what Mr. Campbell's alluding to is I've done some creative problem solving last night, and here's where I'm thinking we are with the 50% staff reduction. So we have I'm using staffing pattern numbers, not actually filled positions, but staffing pattern, because I think I can make a compelling argument that that's our true workforce. Hope so. So we have 587 full-time positions. If you take half of that, that gives us 294. Now, we have 178 part-time positions, and nobody really knows how you're supposed to deal with part-time positions on your staffing pattern. My argument is this: let's treat each part-time position as half of a full-time equivalent position. And so if you take the 178, divide it in half, and then say we can have 50% of those, you're basically taking a quarter of 178, which equates to 44. So if you add the 294 and the 44, you come up with 339. So I look back over the last 7 weeks with this handy-dandy chart that Sue made for me, because she knows I'm not that smart. And our high water mark is Wednesday, and we seem to be right around 190 employees on Wednesday. So if we use 190 as our current staffing level, that leaves us 139 positions that we could still bring back to work and be under the 50% mandatory reduction that we're operating under. There are 82 positions in DPW. There are 8 positions in code enforcement, and there are 23 positions in buildings and grounds. So if we bring those back, that's 113 additional positions, and we've got about 27 positions that we can kind of play with one way or the other, and still be meeting the executive order criteria that we're operating under. So that's kind of where we are at the moment. Again, we're hovering around 190 on our high water mark each week, and if my creative math is correct, we've got 339 to work with.
Okay, I'm opening up the questions for Chris. Matt Hicks.
Yeah, okay, Chris. So I want to go back to the very beginning of your presentation. So we've met 5 of the 7 criteria. So there's 2 criteria, which is the 14-day hospitalizations and the 14-day deaths. Unfortunately, we're lumped in with the rest of our district. And do we have any guidance on when they did that metric calculation to say that we were non-compliant with those 2 things? Are we close and have 11 or 12 days in a row, or are we not even remotely close? We only have 1 or 2, so that we can have some optimism that when the next 14-day period comes up, we were so close this time, we should be trending towards meeting the criteria the next time. Do we have any guidance on that at all from those knuckleheads?
I don't.
Okay.
Short answer to that. But we have a 2 o'clock call this afternoon with the regional group. I missed the first 10 minutes of yesterday's call, and I think that question was asked, and I think the state rep said they were going to get us that for today. Mr. Hankey might have been on that whole call, so he can correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe we'll get that from the group today.
Okay, so when you get that, perhaps you could share it with the rest of us to know that, you know, we're getting closer, or the trend in Albany, Rensselaer, and Schenectady is headed in the right direction, so we're headed that way, or if we should be pessimistic to say it's not even remotely close, and to think that we're going to be open in 2 weeks is not even a pipe dream. So whatever guidance you can get there would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's important. And like today, I'm sharing with you, again, kind of ethereal information bits that we've cobbled together, but I'd rather share more information than not. So yeah, absolutely. If we start to get an indication from the regional group or from the second floor that we're looking to go this way or that way, we'll certainly share that with you as soon as we have it.
And our issues with that, Matt, tended to be with the nursing homes. And that's kind of an Albany County issue. They've got a bunch of nursing homes and a bunch of COVID down there. So that's kind of driving it. And they were having trouble trying to give us the sort of number you've got, because they didn't really know how the nursing home business was going to play out. So we may hear some more today, and we will ask that question, but I bet they aren't going to tell us much.
Another thing to keep in mind, Mr. Hicks, is that, again, these things develop so quickly. On Saturday, I believe it was, the governor issued yet another executive order that requires all nursing home staff to be tested twice a week. Poor Patty, if she's listening, you're a rock star, but she's probably pulling out her hair because somehow she's responsible for all that. So I would not be surprised if you see a considerable uptake in our numbers in the next week to 10 days as the nursing home staff starts to get tested twice a week. And it is what it is. You know, there's nothing we can do about those numbers.
So the second part of my comment is, are we, based upon what you just said and the numbers you presented to us, are we ready to make a motion to bring back DPW at half staff for 2 weeks and full staff June 1st, bring back code enforcement and Matt's guys. And let's say we can make that happen, because based upon your numbers, we can make that happen, and should we make that decision today and move it to the full board on Friday?
I don't think I can answer that question for you because I think that's the prerogative of the board. What I'm saying from the staff perspective is that we have, I feel at this point we have room under the executive order. We can do it. And I think with some careful consultation with the department heads and the safety officer and public health, we can do it safely.
Dan, do we need a motion out of this committee to discuss it on Friday to make that happen?
I'm going to defer that to Roger, whether or not we need a motion, or is it the prerogative, or is it the chairman needs to hear what the will of the board members are and he calls the shot. I don't know how this works.
Well, if you want something to vote on Friday, you need something out of this committee.
You want a resolution, and if we want to take definite action, then we move a resolution out of this committee today for Friday.
Well, that's what I'd like to do, because otherwise you got to do it from the floor Friday, which changes the whole set of rules, and that makes it a little bit more difficult to deal with. So I'd entertain a motion to bring back DPWs on Monday, starting half for 2 weeks, and then back full time on June 1st. Bring back code enforcement full time starting on Monday, and bringing back whatever number you said, Chris, in buildings and grounds starting on Monday that would keep us compliant.
I heard, Mr. Hicks, I heard a second date in there, about, like, would you say half for 2 weeks and then go up? I would caution you maybe about getting too far ahead of yourself, because if metrics change, we may actually have to contract. So go to your half for 2 weeks. We're having board meetings more frequently as it is, number one, so you can change that. If things go well, you can keep progressing. If things don't go well, however, you could actually go backwards, or rephrase it to expressing that, the chairman, because right now you're operating under the chairman's executive order, so you can supersede that by a resolution. But I don't want to look too far in the future, so I'm not sure, and I'll defer to the board on this, whether that 2 weeks, looking a month ahead is too far to look ahead in a dynamic situation. I'm concerned it might be, because we're doing 2 week monitoring periods at this point, or the state is doing those, and that's what they're using to make their decisions. I'm throwing that out there just because a month, we're operating in like 2 week snapshots now, not 4 week snapshots.
No, but Chris's numbers would allow us to bring them all back actually on Monday and still be compliant. What I was going to do is phase it in so that 2 weeks, so Deb has time to get everything organized safety-wise and COVID-wise for those guys, so they can all come back. Because even if we bring them all back, we'll still be compliant based upon the numbers Chris presented to us.
All right, with that in mind, it should work then, as long as we get everybody trained up.
That's my thought.
Okay, now, I've got a motion by Matt, John. I don't know if you want a second or if you want to make a comment, but I need to ask for a second first.
I'll second it. Dan.
Okay, Dave O'Brien seconded. Okay, John, you have the floor. You're muted. John, you're muted.
Follow
There you
up
go.
on that motion. Are we gonna have to rescind the state of emergency, or do we plan on paying time and a half when everybody comes back?
Just a technical point on that one. The way it stands right now, if we bring those departments back, everybody who's reporting to work would be paid time and a half. If the board would like to change that, it's not the state of emergency that you're changing. You're amending, rescinding, tweaking, whatever you want to do, to the resolution that was passed on March 18th. So the state of emergency stays in effect and is independent. If you want to change the compensation scheme, that's just amending that resolution.
Okay, so with the motion that Matt made and was seconded by Dave, compensation isn't in that. Do we pass this and then we'll discuss compensation, or do you want to have it all resolved in one motion? I'd rather keep them separate so that it makes it simpler to vote on. So any other day and a half?
Debbie read back what this resolution says?
No.
Not really.
I'm sure she
She's
can,
working on
won't
it.
she?
Well, my point of my question is, there's been a lot of discussion, so, and it's been fluid, so I don't know really what Matt's resolution says. For example, would we bring back the county clerk? Are deeds, transfer deeds, mortgages being recorded now? Would that,
Yes.
No, that's not what Matt's
No, but
motion.
they are being done already.
all right, so what's Matt's motion?
Our staff here.
Okay, well,
Dana, here, all
are
I
you
want to do
ready,
is,
Deb?
go ahead, Deb, if you think you got it.
Well, no, the motion was to bring DPW back half for 2 weeks and then the remainder, and we would still be compliant. Code enforcement would come back full-time Monday, and buildings and grounds would come back full-time Monday.
Correct.
Okay, but I thought part of the discussion was even if DPW comes back full, we are still compliant.
Correct.
So do we
That
need
is
to
correct.
amend that motion to include all of DPW?
Well, I mean, but did it that way, Dana, because I wanted to give Deb time to implement all the safety precautions and get them all trained up so we know what we're doing before we just jump back in with everybody. It gives, like Roger said, time for Phil and Deb to get everybody organized to know what they have to do regarding masks and sanitization and how many guys in a truck and how to take care of that. It's just, that was my thought.
It takes 2 weeks to do that? Can't that be done in one day?
Deb
Yes,
has
Deb.
her hand up. She'd like to answer that first. Deb Donahue.
I think that the 50% plays very well into our plan to going back because we're going to be cleaning the trucks and buttoning up winter for the first week. We're going to be getting stuff ready to go out for our summer operations in the second week. That's our plan. And our dynamics are going to change dramatically when we go back full time because they're not working at the barns. We're paving, we're doing the bridges, we're doing the culverts, we're washing bridges. It's like a totally different job when we go full time. And so it would give us the opportunity to work out the bugs. It just lends itself well to doing the 50 for 2 weeks and the 100 after.
Okay, so are we gonna have another meeting in 2 weeks to say come back full time?
No, that was in Matt's motion
But
already.
Roger said not to do that.
No, Matt, I probably misunderstood Matt's motion. So he was just talking about DPW. I was concerned that we were talking about gearing up everybody. So Matt's motion was the first 2 weeks, you go have these, and then after that, we'll come back to full operations for DPW. And so that's fine. And we'd still be in compliance today if we did that. So even if we don't move forward, we'll still be in today's situation in 2 weeks. And we'll be compliant. So, and the other thing about going halvesies is with everybody being in the barns those first 2 weeks getting ready for full operations, having half staff each time allows them to better socially distance as well. Because as Deb said, when they go to the field, they'll be spaced farther apart. But when they're working on trucks, taking off equipment and getting the winter stuff done, they'll all be in one single location. And now instead of packing the full barn in there and having to worry about the cross-contamination, sharing tools and everything else, we'll have fewer people there at once for those first 2 weeks, getting everybody back up to speed, getting everything prepared, getting the training done. So when they hit the field, they can hit the field running and they'll all know what they're doing.
Okay, could it be you bring half them back for 1 week, give them the training, and then team B come the second week, get all the training, so after 2 weeks, everyone has had all the training?
I think that's what's being contemplated.
All right, thank you.
I'll let Deb speak to that, but that was my understanding of what was being thought about.
No, that is exactly what we planned on doing.
All right, thank you.
Just Sue's next, but I have a point clarity here. Now, Matt's motion was half and wait 2 weeks, and you're saying, Deb, that you can do it half and wait 1 week?
No.
And then the other half, what was, it sounds a little confusing. I just don't want to confuse for anybody.
You've done that already.
So we would like to bring, I want to be really clear on this. We'd like to bring half of the barns back. like we'll have, employees 1 through 30 the first week and then 31 through 60 the second week. So in the barns, we wanted to do half, but our thought was that the foreman would have to work both of those weeks because they're the ones who are doing the training and going to be responsible for all of this. So it is a little more than half if you count it that way. So
Yes,
there's no miscommunication here on that, but I think we're still safe with numbers, right, Chris?
correct.
Okay.
Right. And so Matt, that is your motion then, right?
Yes, correct. I'll let Deb and Chris decide who's coming back and which barns at what time for those 2 weeks. That's up to them.
Very good. Now, Sue, you had your hand up first.
Yes, Chris, we talked about this before with the code and proximity to public health. Were you able to figure that out with location?
So we have a couple options. One may be to work with code enforcement and public health and try to basically, for lack of a better term, segregate the building. As you walk in the main entrance of Annex 1 from Route 4, you come to code enforcement before you get to public health. So we could, in some way, shape, or form, barrier that off so that you physically couldn't go from that side of the building into the public health side. My concern at the moment is restrooms. I got to work through that with John and Patty and make sure that they're, we can, that needs to be worked through. The other option, which I think Matt sitting to my right, he's likely to throw something at me, and I know John is going to be angry if he's listening. The other option would be to move code enforcement up here to the old Board of Elections office. I know John doesn't want to do that. I know that will be a huge time suck for Matt, but that may be our best option. So we need to work through that, but I heard the board loud and clear that we want to try to get them back, so we'll make it work one way or the other.
Okay. The other
Okay,
question.
Jay. Sorry, go ahead, Sue. Nope.
I'm sorry. I've got 2 more questions. Public health, do they have the amount of people they need? I know I talked to Patty on Sunday. It was Mother's Day, and she was in the office working with help. Are they doing that all the time?
Yes, they are. They're on a 7-day operation. It's fluctuated, but the nurses are working, I think, roughly 6-10-hour days a week. We're trying to augment that capability at the moment.
If they have to go into the nursing home as has been suggested, would they need one of those slots available for a new employee? It's hard to tell.
I am gonna fight tooth and nail to keep us from going into a nursing home. The chairman, Tim, Roger, and Patty were all in the room with me when I talked to the governor's office.
Yeah.
And I said that we were very supportive of his efforts to increase the testing in nursing homes, and that we would do everything we could to collaborate and coordinate that testing. But I made it very clear that we did not have any staff capability to conduct testing. So what we do have the capability to do is to deliver test kits to nursing homes. We've even figured out a way that we can collect them and take them down to Wadsworth, although we heard, Mr. Hankey and I heard on the call yesterday that there's a problem at Wadsworth now as far as capacity. So we're willing to facilitate and coordinate, but we cannot do testing. And I've made that very clear to the state. I believe Patty has as well. And the state initially said, oh, that's okay, we'll have the nursing homes do it. And I think maybe misguidedly, the state had a misconception that there were RNs aplenty at nursing homes, and that's just not the case. So I'm trying very hard to push that onus back on the state.
Okay, that was my second question. One more question.
Sue, hey, Sue.
Yes.
We've got a motion and a second on the floor that's totally somewhere else. Are you taking us back to that, or can your question wait until we vote on the motion?
I guess, yes, it can wait, but I'm concerned that the amount of slots that we have available for people coming back, and they're going towards code, building and grounds, and DPW, that we have enough in case we need to hire someone else for public health.
That's a good question. It goes right along with the motion.
Right.
We currently do, but I think you make a very important point that we need to keep that in mind as we operate under the 50% mandatory reduction, and as we begin to bring departments back, we need to keep in mind that we need a buffer there in case we need to ramp up public health.
Right, thank you.
Thank you. Good question. Dana Half, your hand was up.
It can wait.
Any other questions pertaining to this motion? Jay, you had your hand up
I'm all set.
earlier.
Vote. I'm all set.
Okay, Matt Jones has now a question.
A couple things. One was just to answer Chris's concerns about, code. There is a physical barrier between the nurses and code already. There's a door with no wall. There's bathrooms on both ends. I think if you went to appointment with code, which they kind of do already, I think there would be probably a non-issue over there.
You just don't want to.
Well, yeah, no. But there is plenty of ways to segregate them in that building. There's multiple entrances. We can change, you know, the way the doors work and everything. The second thing is more of a question to you than with your staffing and everything. So if I bring back, we have outside organizations, and I don't know if they count in your employees that work out of our buildings. Same thing, we have Cornell, we have Lee. I think they're working from home, but there is going to be interest. I know in Leap, I talked to the director yesterday. They are working mostly from home, but they do need to start having a couple people come in, maybe a few days a week, and how to proceed, and how does that work with your numbers? Are they on top of your county numbers? Are they part of your county numbers?
No, that's a good question. I'm glad you asked.
You're going to want to read this back, or you think I'll let it go?
The short answer is they do not count toward our staffing levels because they are not part of our quote-unquote organization. On the other hand, from an employer perspective and from a public health perspective, we need to keep that in mind as we look at the safety of our employees. So, no, they do not impact our ability to meet the guidelines that we're operating under, but they do increase our potential risk to our employees and the public. So yes, it's something we need to be aware of. It's something we need to work with those outside agencies on, but we don't need to take them into account in our numbers.
You know, we have food trees from Leap. We have, there's multiple, same thing with over at Burgoyne.
Okay, Sue Clary has another question or comment.
Yeah, one more question, Chris. Do we have the tools that we need in order to open up even at the levels that we're talking? Have we received thermometers? Have we received what we needed?
So I just received yesterday, finally, the shipment of infrared thermometers that they broke up so that the feds wouldn't steal them at customs. And we have, that will work for, it's perfect for DPW. It'll help with the departments that we're talking about now. We have another solution that's on order that's coming in that will help us with a larger number of employees coming in the door. We don't have those yet, but again, as we talked about it, we're really looking at mid-June for a reopening, you know, of something that looks like normal. We should be good with that. Our vendor has said mid-May for this new technology. So we've got the portable infrared thermometers, which we talked about are problematic. We've got a better solution that's coming, and we should have that by the time we're looking to really ramp back up.
Are we ready to vote on Mac's motion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Very good. Brian has a question.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna go where we went last meeting with time and a half, because I think, a lot of supervisors had come to the conclusion, excuse me, that time and a half was, not gonna be paid from the 15th going forward. We were just gonna go back to regular pay unless it's actual overtime. And I know it's been on everybody's mind, but I want to go back even a little further to when we started the whole thing and review a little bit of that. When we closed the building, there was no mention of FEMA funds, nothing to pay that time and a half. I think everyone was on board that, because it was unanimous, that we were going to do that for our employees. We're in a philosophy of a no harm mode to our employees as far as we could go. I think it outlasted the length of time that any of us had expected or any of our taxpayers or residents really want to hear about anymore. And I think Jay alluded to that in our DPW meeting. But I think going forward, our philosophy should be the same, that it's still a no harm philosophy to our employees as much as it can be, and to our residents. And one of the emails I sent in an answer to one that Matt Hicks initially started, I said it's going to be more about cost and effect. And no harm doesn't mean just to our employees, but to our taxpayers. They paid their taxes to make certain things happen throughout the year. The pandemic has changed some of those things, and not everything will get done, but we still want the least harm to the taxpayer. We still want the least harm to the resident and to the employee. So I think our employees need to know that we've stuck and we still plan to stick by them as much as we can as this unfolds, because we have no way of knowing where it's possibly going. And we very much appreciate all the time and effort they're putting in, and we appreciate all the time and effort that people have had to sit home and put up with some of the things that are going on. And yes, we've paid well for it at time and a half, and there is a certain possibility that money does get reimbursed. It's just a little bit smaller possibility than we had thought a couple of weeks ago. But with that being said, I think going forward now, and and I'm sure the board's going to let me know if I'm all wet, but I think it's time that we go, starting next week, that we go to and we'll do it at Friday's board meeting. I would assume that we're going to go back to regular pay, and we're in hopes that in 30 days we probably have most everybody back to work. It may be 45, it may be 60, but we're starting the reopening process. Everybody's working on it. Sam's got a committee together to reopen the whole county, not just government. We just heard the government's in phase 2. So I'm going to make the motion that as we start up on Monday, that we go back to regular pay and start getting a little normalcy back here. And we look at cost and effect on things going forward where we can save money, but in no means saving it on the employees' back if we can help it. I think we want to go out of our way to make sure our employees are taken care of, but I want to make sure our taxpayers are taken care of, because I think they're both extremely important, and not one is outweighed more than the other. So I'm going to make that motion that we go back to regular pay.
Just before I ask for a second, I want to ask Roger, is that the right way doing it, or would it be to rescind the overtime? Which way is the right
You would
way for that motion?
amend the emergency declaration.
Amend the motion we passed on the 18th.
To rescind the hazardous pay.
Right.
I just want to ask, let Roger, I agree with you, Jay, that's why I was asking.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with the emergency declaration. That was a resolution the full board passed, as Chris said a while ago. So we want to rescind or amend that resolution, or probably rescind it. Either way, I'll take a look at the resolution. I was trying to call it up, but I can't talk and try to open programs on my computer at the same time. I can't walk and chew gum either. So it's either do something with that resolution to make sure that there's the time and a half for folks to come to work will be done. And I'll either do it by rescinding the resolution or amending so much of the resolution that accomplishes that goal. So I understand the goal. I'll make sure a resolution goes out in the mail. Well, it's this Friday, right? So
We'll try to send them out on
right, we'll try to send them out on Thursday, get you out something. It'll either, if that resolution had more than one thing, and I can't remember if it just talked about the time and a half or not. Okay, there you go. Thank you. Apparently she can do walk and chew gum at the same time. Go down to your results, please. God bless Tim Harvey. Keep going. Keep going.
I think we just need to rescind, number 3.
Well, we need to make sure that the board, that's what they want. I'm just putting it out there.
Sorry, to implement what you suggested, Mr. Campbell, I'm saying I think the effect.
Yeah. I mean, let's make sure that
Yeah,
the board wants.
we just need to rescind, we just need to amend it to, rescind the third, bullet point there. It talks about hourly employees who are deemed essential. So be paid for a time and a half.
So
The duration of the emergency closure, we'll just rescind that. So we'll just say time, freeze or amend it and say, effective Monday's date, hourly employees will be paid at regular time for time worked.
And Brian, that's
That's where I was going.
okay, so with that being said, the screen is cut off. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay,
Second.
Okay, we have several seconds. Don Moore, Jay Skelly, Matt Hicks, and John Rozell. Any further discussion? There being none, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Carried. Very good. Anything else?
I have one.
Debbie has one.
This morning I did email out the mortgage tax information. The mortgage tax report will be presented at the board meeting for adoption. There's also a resolution for the supplemental mortgage tax disbursement and a motion to move that to the full board if needed.
Move it.
Motion by Brian, seconded by Cassie Fedler to move this to the full board on Friday, the mortgage tax report. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Carried. We're down to other business, day and a half.
I have a question about procedure. We did several motions today that's going to go to the full meeting, which is within 3 days. That we don't have the normal 10 days that we normally require in order not to suspend the rules. Are these going to be presented in normal format, or are we going to have to suspend the rules on what was done today because it did not hit the 10-day prior deadline?
The mailing rule applies to resolutions that don't come out of committee.
Oh, okay.
So you should be fine.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Is there any other business that needs to be brought? Matt Hicks.
Well, Deb had her hand up first. I'll defer to Deb if I can go after her.
I just wanted to know, we didn't have temperature taking in our plan. Is that something that we're required to do? Or just get with Chris on that?
Did you hear Chris?
No.
We'll talk offline, Deb.
Matt Hicks.
Hey, Chris, you probably don't know the answer to this. I'm putting you on the spot a little bit. But on the federal responses that we've seen so far, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and then they're talking about a phase 4, which would supposedly be money trickling down to towns, counties, municipalities, et cetera. Is it reasonable to think that the first 3 phases, there's probably nothing coming our way per se in relief, and we're going to have to rely upon whatever comes in that 4th? Is that what we're looking at from a Fed standpoint?
So there were little things in the first one. There was the $70,000 for Board of Elections. There was, off the top of my head, I want to say it was about $500,000 in EFMAP for the Medicaid portion. Al and I have kind of jokingly said we're certainly not going to count on that EFMAP money until we see it, because the governor has sticky fingers right now, and I'll be, a little surprised if it trickles down to us. We've had extensive conversations with our state federal delegation. I called Mitch McConnell's office a couple weeks ago. He didn't take my call. I don't understand why. But our federal delegation is definitely on board with getting funding to the counties in the state. The formula that we had when they were finalizing the negotiations on the last round of COVID stimulus would have given Washington County $5.4 million. To the best of our knowledge, that's currently the formula that Senator Schumer is taking into the negotiations. I think it really boils down to where Leader McConnell is going to come down on this. There is an increasing push for state and local funding from other parts of the country that are a little more purple and red, and it'll be interesting to see if that gets his attention or not. So, so far, we're being told that, you know, it's looking positive that there will be something in this next round, but I don't know any details yet.
So the first three, we'll see minimal impact. That's not going to really help us that much to be an offset. It'll be the fourth round that's really going to tell the tale on how it affects Washington County.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Day and a half. You're muted.
Question for Al. We've been hearing how the state is going to cut their state aid 20 to 40%. One of the graphics you had up said that AIM for Washington County would be down 34%. My question is, what effects of state aid will be upon the towns for 2020? AIM, we get AIM from the county. Is that correct? It's a pass through from the state, but the county gives AIM
No,
to towns?
two separate items. The sales tax I reported out is not your AIM funding, two separate things.
Right. No, but what state funding will be in effect in this year's 2020 budget? That's going to be cut.
I don't know if Chris wants to take that. He's been following that really closely. We still don't
Yeah,
have.
so I can help with that. So there's a couple parts to your question, Mr. Happ. We'll start with the AIM funding. So it is no longer state money that goes to the towns and villages, right? Except for those four municipalities that kept it because it was the other side of the threshold. It's now county sales tax money that he's stealing and giving to you. So it's county money that's going to you in the form of AIM payment. That being said, I don't think the budget director is going to cut the AIM funding to the towns because it doesn't get them anything. It's no longer their money. So I would expect that towns will not be harmed at all from AIM funding. I think the only place that towns are going to see an impact would be CHIPS. And my understanding, at least, is that towns are eligible for all three pots of funding, right? So you got CHIPS, Pave New York, and Extreme Winter Recovery. Those are subject to cuts. There's two numbers out there right now for how much he's going to cut. His financial plan is out of balance. He's saying 20%. I would argue more like 16%, but whatever. He's out of balance by, let's say, 20%. So the way the language was written in the Article 7 bills that were passed as part of the budget is that he can either make across-the-board cuts at the same percentage his financial plan is out of balance, which would mean a 20% cut to our state aid, or he can do it to such appropriations as necessary to bring the financial plan back into balance. It seems as though he's opting for the second option, and the reason for that is that he can hold Medicaid and education foundation aid harmless. So basically, because won't somebody think of the children and the old people, he's not going to cut Medicaid and he's not going to cut education. So if you take those two things out, which are the two biggest areas of spending in the state budget, he'd have to cut us 50% to balance his budget. Now, I think he's done that for a couple reasons. One is those are two very large and powerful constituencies, Medicaid and education. The other is that it's a bit of saber rattling to the Senate Republicans at the federal level to try to say, you know, there will be, you know, blood in the streets and, you know, real biblical stuff if you don't give us money because, you know, we'll just lay all local governments to waste. So I think the truth lies somewhere in between 20 and 50% if there is no federal funding to the states and locals. And so one of the challenging things, and I was talking to Mr. Campbell about this yesterday, is unfortunately, with the new projections I'm getting from the economic models and from what that last sales tax deposit is, we could be looking at as much as a $4 million hit to sales tax. If you take a $4 million hit to sales tax and the governor goes through and cuts us 50% of our state aid, that's another $8-9 million. You're looking at a $13-14 million budget shortfall in a $90 million general fund. That's problematic, right? If round 4 of the stimulus had enough federal funding to the states to keep the state largely whole, and we got the $5.4 million that was in the original formula that was being negotiated as phase 3, we could be $1.4 million above budget because we'd have a $4 million loss in sales tax, get $5.4 million in direct funding, and if the state gets enough money, they don't cut us. So there's a whole whole host of possibilities. We will get some clarity from the budget director, we're being told by the end of this week, as to what he's looking to cut and what percentage he's looking to cut. And then we'll see what the negotiation timeline is at the federal level. They're talking, but at least, you know, at the staff level, what we're hearing is that there's no real urgency on behalf of the Senate Republicans. So we'll have to see how that pans out.
Thank you.
Sue,
Chris, who would I call to ask about dissolution money that the town of Salem gets?
You'd want to call Department of State, and somebody in Department of State, Division of Local Government. I'd start with Carl Ublocker.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
does anyone else have any thoughts, comments they'd like to share? Dana Half.
Chris, I'm hearing that the governor wants, I don't know if it's each county or each economic region, to have a control center. I saw an email from the Warren County administrator that he is in charge of their control center. Do we need one for our county, or is it going to be by the region? And what cost is that going to be?
So that is it's a state entity, the control region. There's the control center. There's one for each regional economic development council. So ours is in the capital region. I think what you're referring to from Mr. Moore was that he is the Warren County representative to the control center. Mr. Hankey, the vice chairman, is ours. So we don't need to establish one. It'll be down in Albany somewhere physically. I think all the meetings will be virtual. And Chairman Hall has already made our appointment to it, so we're represented. And that was it's kind of a weird name for things, but that was the group I was referring to that we met at 2 o'clock yesterday. We're meeting at 2 o'clock today via teleconference to work through some of these issues. So it's the group that's going to be developing the regional reopening plan, and then there's some staff professionals that'll be done through the state that will aggregate and analyze the data that monitors compliance with the 7 criteria.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Is there any other business to bring before the Finance Committee? If not, I adjourn. Thank you all for attending.